So this week we're joined by John. We like to call him John from Vashon, or just John Vashon. John and I have been crossing paths at the Northwest Flower and Garden Show for years. And you know how it is. Like we've talked about this with like Kate and whatnot, but you're always rushing to the next thing and you never quite have enough time. So we're finally getting down to actually talk. And we just like started. There was no intro, no nothing. And then Nicole is editing this podcast and she's like, there's absolutely no intro for what you and John are talking about, how you guys know each other. So here's our quick intro. John's display gardens this year was a full-on love letter to sedges and those grass-like plants that most of us walk right past at the nursery. If you know John, it tracks. Like last year it was oaks and then this year it's sedges. So it was fun to just like get to talk to him and chat and get to understand where his inspiration comes from. It's a lovely example of how our experiences show up in the gardens that we create. Welcome to the Relish Gardens podcast, where we have conversations about the intersection between the garden and your life and how all of those things are intertwined. How to care for your space, how to prune, basically everything that's related to the design, development, and keeping of a garden. I'm Claire Liddell Hanna, the founder and lead designer at Relish Gardens, where we build, design, and maintain beautiful gardens. Let's dig in.
I'm John Coghlan. I live on Vashon Island. I'm a designer and a gardener. I have a business called HomeGrown Organics. My main focus is on the overall design and the plants and the maintenance of these beautiful spaces that people are trying to create. I do design work off of Vashon too, but it's like 90% or so or more. I feel very fortunate, honestly. It's so nice to really work where I live, and I live in a small town, but I moved to a place where people select to be there. And oftentimes they wanted to be there because they wanted a garden.
People are like, who are you talking to? I'm like, John from Vashon. Our whole team refers to you that way.
That makes me very happy. I mean that. It makes me really happy. I grew up in North Seattle. And then I left to go to school in Southern California. And I lived in Southern California for 8 years. I was not aware of the existence of plants until I was about 26 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, I was just oblivious. I was into filmmaking and theater and music and creative arts. I mean, I loved the beach. I was in cross country and track. I would train all summer, just taking like an hour-long run. So I would run down to the beach and I would run along the water and I would get up to Carkeek Park and I would run along the creek and up to the top of Carkeek Park and back down. So I have a deep appreciation for the ecology that I grew up around. Salmon in the streams, the transition from the mossy forests down to the sunny beach and the blue herons. All those things were really important to me growing up, but plants were not. When I was in college, I remember I didn't know what a tomato came from, like if you dug it out of the ground or if it grew on a tree.
Really?
I was just not paying attention to that at all, you know?
Wow.
And then my wife and I, when we got married, it was the first time I had my own space. Because we moved into like a little 1-bedroom apartment in Orange County. And I just started collecting plants. Like it just happened, you know, like I would go to Home Depot because I needed to fix something. And I'd be like, oh, that's a beautiful little plumeria. Just bring that home because I could put it on my little deck. By the time I moved back to the Pacific Northwest, which was like 2011, I was like, I'm actually going to restart my life because this is what I want to do, you know?
Yeah. It's so interesting how people's like backstories and where they've lived kind of influences their plant palette and what kind of plants they're interested in. But you could see the progression, like the work that I've seen at the show. You can see the plants that you're interested in being influenced by where you've lived.
In my past life, what I really wanted to do is be a sort of, you know, world traveling, helping people person. You know, just I wanted to go live in the highlands of South America and help farmers. I was really serious about that's what I wanted to do. I learned how to speak Spanish. I spent a lot of time in my 20s when I lived in California attending a Spanish-speaking church and hanging out with Spanish-speaking families, mostly from Mexico and Central America, but also from Cuba and the Caribbean. And talking about your plant palette influences, I feel very American in the broadest sense of the word because deep in me is the connection to the Puget Sound, but also coastal Southern California. And then I had the privilege of traveling in the Caribbean, the highlands of Guatemala, where my wife is from, and traveling around the Andes in South America. And all those things really did inspire me. I found them very beautiful. Yeah.
Now I'm like thinking back to your previous gardens. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. It was interesting because it feels like we chose a lot of the same plants, or we ended up in some similar spaces. I think you're the only one who had like agaves last year besides me.
Yep.
And
yeah, we both had big agaves.
Yeah. And then you were doing oaks. I have a fondness for oaks because I grew up in Northern California and lived in Southern California. It's interesting to see that now and think about your gardens with that kind of perspective, because the landscapes do influence the way that I think we put things together and the way that we think about plant combinations, even though, the work that we do isn't always mimicking exactly, nature necessarily.
When you did your first garden with Little Prince, right?
Yeah.
That was 2022.
Yeah.
I liked your garden a lot. That year is when I decided I'm going to do a garden next year, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember like walking around the gardens and kind of looking, and you kind of think, what's not being done that I would like to do?
Yeah.
But your garden, what is just so wonderful with all these wonderful little, botanical treasures from Little Prince. It was tucked together in a fun way. And you had like a rock that had like a dish element, so it had a little puddle in it.
Little rain.
So like, that I was like, okay, I want to take some of those ideas, because that's what appeals to me. That's what I want to see,
Yeah.
The show's the place where we get to say, hey, John, what do you want to show? And it's like, oh, it's a fun chance to like do some really self-centered, narcissistic, just what do I want to make,
Yeah. What am I interested in today?
Yeah, exactly.
You ended up in Vashon, and from everything I've heard from you, you absolutely adore it. What draws you to the area?
We stumbled upon it because my wife and I had just had a baby. So this was 13, almost 14 years ago. We had a tradition of going for our anniversary in June, always going to a bed and breakfast. And it was our first June with the baby. We went to a bed and breakfast on Bainbridge Island. It was a cute place, and it was like a duck farm. So she had like 100 ducks and geese, and it was great. And then it was like this little farm and a couple houses and really well done. And then it was just woods around you, so we were at that bed and breakfast, and we both were kind of like, we want our daughter to grow up. Like we wanted to raise animals. We wanted to plant trees. We wanted her to be able to wander outside and go climb a tree in the woods. And so we kind of got started on that track. And then I had met several friends who just happened to live on Vashon or moved to Vashon after we met them. So we went and visited that same summer, and then we went for it. It took a little while, but when she was a year and a half old, we moved to Vashon. So we've been here now for 12 years, something like that. I'm saying Vashon Island, and I recognize people might be listening to this who are not from Washington State, and even people around the Puget Sound don't really know Vashon Island. Like I didn't growing up. I grew up in the Seattle area. I came to Vashon once when I was in like 6th grade, didn't even know where I was. I just knew we took a ferry. I think it was like a camp, scouts or something.
Yeah.
It's an island in the southernmost part of the Puget Sound, right near Seattle and Tacoma. It's the size of Manhattan Island in terms of square acres or whatever, but it has like 14,000 people living here, So it's heavily forested. And if you look at a map, you can just see a satellite map or like a road map. You can see like there's just green. We have a lot of vegetation. There had been settlements on the island. They were kind of more summer communities, and some people stayed here year round, especially this little harbor we have called Quartermaster Harbor. So there was an indigenous presence on the island. But when Europeans came here, they quickly logged it and took out gravel. There were basically wood burning ferries going back and forth from Vashon to Seattle, carrying gravel and sand to downtown and to Tacoma, and burning the wood from the forest. So, in the 50s and 60s, people that grew up on Vashon, it was more like the south end of Whidbey Island. Like you could see north, south, east, west in all directions from anywhere.
Really?
There were no trees. The island has a long history of exploitation of those resources. And then it did have a strong farming aspect. A lot of Norwegians and Japanese, Germans moved here. And there was one Japanese family in particular that started what is now a King County Park, which is Mukai Garden that I work at. It's a wonderful park. It's open to the public every day of the year. It was a woman-designed garden in like the 1920s, which was not a thing in the 1920s. In Japan especially. So a Japanese woman who just missed home and she wanted to make a Japanese-style mountaintop stroll garden. even though her husband, I mean, he built a very American style house. He ran a very successful strawberry business. They would pack strawberries in straw with ice and ship it to the East Coast and ship it to Europe.
Wow.
There's a lot of history.
Yeah.
It's really a fascinating place. And some of that history is able to be accessed through spaces like this Mukai Garden that I really do encourage people to visit.
Okay, we'll have to put that in the show notes too. I love public gardens that you're like able to get into and be able to see and kind of develop perspective from. I think that's really cool.
It's really a wonderful part of our island. Part of what I love about Vashon is that it's on the way to nowhere, right? So people choose to be here.
Yeah.
And at some level of cost, like they gave up things to be here. And oftentimes they care about gardening, farming, music, drama, a lot of things I shared, There did used to be a lot of nurseries on Vashon, specialty nurseries. We have Langley Fine Gardens. I don't know if you ever know their stuff or buy it. They grow wonderful perennials. And we're so lucky because every year they stock spring and summer in front of our grocery store all of these lobelias and really rare, wonderful things. And you're just like, oh, maybe I should pick up one of those. The kind of thing normally you'd have to like drive to Dan Hinckley's place to get, right? And it's it's just there at the grocery store. So in some ways on Vashon, we've been lucky because we've had horticultural and farming things happening here. One of my favorite is the Beale greenhouses, which were one of the most well-respected orchid growers in the world. And during the Second World War, the Kew Gardens in England sent over some of their most valuable specimens to Vashon Island to be protected while they were being bombed, right?
Really?
Yes. And then, of course, over time, labor costs went up, energy costs went up, and they started moving their operations. The greenhouses are like overgrown with big leaf maples and alders and blackberries. And I mean, it's kind of beautiful when you drive by and you look, it's like, wow, this is like a greenhouse is being taken over by nature. It's been a big thing. Who's going to take it over and do the cleanup and make something of this? It's like 16 acres, I think. It's a big property. Really? But someone who's a good friend of mine, who's a botanist, she and with other people has bought the land and they're starting to do some things.
I'm excited to see what they do with all those greenhouses.
In the 90s, it might be the 80s, there was development happening around this bog, which is called Whispering Firs Bog on Vashon. And people were concerned because many other bogs had existed on the island. And these peat bogs can get ruined really quickly, right? And so these people rallied together. They were like, this is a really special, beautiful bog. It's actually rare now in the lower Puget Sound to have bogs. The thing they say on their website is it's one of only 3 intact bogs in lower Puget Sound.
Wow.
And so I'm curious because you said there's one near you.
Yeah, there's one near me that has a floating boardwalk. And I mean, it's absolutely stunning.
Oh, it's the best.
I'm a bad hiker because I just like to go to the same spots and just watch the plants unfurl and the moss grow and the leaves drop. And it's like a handful of different places. But I love walking the same spaces because you see the life that is living there in a way that you don't when you walk somewhere once. But I love that bog. They have like little signs and it's like, I don't know, they said like 20 feet deep of just peat. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And the trees, the hemlock trees and even the cedars, they're so stunted by the conditions that they end up looking like bonsai trees. Their foliage is kind of acid green, like limey yellow green, and they're smaller and twisted and beat up. And then you can look like 100 yards in the distance and you see a hemlock that's like 100 feet tall and dark mountain green. And you're like, wow, It's really stunning. Yeah. But the Vashon Land Trust formed as a result of we got to protect this space. And now like the Vashon Land Trust has become a really important part of our island, like basically maintaining some of our most beautiful shorelines and forests and allowing them to be accessible to people.
Well, it's interesting to see peat too, because there's all this discussion in our industry about getting rid of peat as like a plant propagation method, and to like actually see peat or the effects of peat and how that changes like the growing conditions for these sites.
Like many things, people thought we'll always have this. I mean, I talked to some people who grew up on the island that were like, we loved playing in the bogs. Like there were bogs all over the island, and you'd like be like, "Hey, let's go play in the bog," and just run through it, and like your feet are sinking in, and you're just like rolling around, and if you had a business and you were like, "I need peat," it was like, "Oh, there's tons of it. I'll just go get some," And then of course, eventually, it's like, okay, now there's now there's only one peat bog on the island.
This was the first time I'd ever seen one. I didn't grow up with them in California. So it's just like such a foreign concept of a peat bog and the impact and the carbon sink and all of these kinds of things that we hear about. But it's like to actually see one and be in one and to realize the impact on the greater landscape around you.
Yeah. When I got started in landscaping, I got involved with Seattle's RainWise program. We were digging out people's lawns and creating like little sedge depressions, like little rain gardens where water from the roof would puddle. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, peat bogs and marshes and kind of wet thickets and creeks and streams. Like Seattle used to be full of those features, but it was like the engineer and the city planner's number one nemesis. So it was always pave over it, drain it. That was the mandate. And they did it efficiently. And so like, you're in West Seattle and you're in like a part of a neighborhood that has really bad flooding problems during a rainstorm. But you look at it, it's like the road goes down and then it pops back up and there's just this really low spot and there's houses across the whole thing. And you're like, how much more beautiful would it have been to like maintain that really inhabitable, bottomland marsh and then have homes around it, but instead we're like, nope. Just make a little roller coaster of a road and do as much pipe work as we can to try to drain the water away. And so I enjoyed doing the rain garden work in the city because it felt like I was trying to bring back something. I was taken early by sedges. I've always had a thing about them. I think I fell in love with sedges through the RainWise program. I wasn't like a natives only person. I've never been that. But definitely there's this sense of awe about when you plant something that used to be there, but it was taken away and now you've reintroduced it. So if you take out someone's lawn and you redirect water there and you plant sluice sedge, and then it just does really well and it looks really beautiful. There's something magical about that. I just remember when I was not many years into gardening and just being like, it's like standing in water like 5 months out of the year. A lot of plants would die like that. And then it dries out and it's in the sun baking all summer. And it's like, no problem. I'll just wait until it rains again. And I just was like, it felt like a superpower. It felt very alluring.
We've been talking a lot about what parameters are when you're going into designing a garden. It's like, how are you making decisions for your garden? And I mean, as much as you're making decisions for the landscape and the right plant, right place type situation, there's a huge amount of decision making that comes in when you're trying to figure out what to buy for your space or make it look cohesive and how to kind of edit and then curate these spaces. And I think it's something that you've done really well. We were talking at the show, at the show, we're all kind of like, oh, do you have any of this? I need some more of this, sharing and trading and whatnot.
It's very collegial. It's fun.
It is. But it's like one of the things I noticed is that you had like a very strong set of parameters for your garden that you were building at the show, and you do every year. And I am such a fan of parameters because it helps me make decisions. But I don't know, how does that work in the show setting? And then how do you implement that sort of thing in your design spaces? I think it's one of those things that designers do without knowing or articulating.
I think that's very true because it's in both the show and when you're designing for a client. If there's no direction, it's really difficult. I mean, you could do anything. But what I find as a designer, the more you can define the vision, then you close the available. And then eventually you're kind of like, if you were really going to do the thing that you most desire and the thing that fits the most with your land, then we're really left with only a few options. You have less choices. Whereas if there's no vision, then the choices are infinite and it's overwhelming, And I often start with people. I mean, some people, it's easy. It's like they say, I just want native plants. And it's like, okay, great. Like that's a helpful limiting factor, I love the question of where are you from? I mean, people often move here from different parts of the country or different parts of the world. And sometimes we can't grow anything that grows in tropical, subtropical India.
Right.
But we can make a garden that feels good to them, that reminds them of home,
Yeah.
So I ask those kind of questions. I oftentimes just say, use Pinterest or magazines or whatever you use. Find me lots of pictures of stuff you like. And I just scan it to try to see a pattern, like everything. Because then I'll be like, I don't even know if you noticed this, but you keep selecting whatever, it's a very Mediterranean classical kind of garden or something,
Right.
And then they might say, oh, maybe I am. And then the more things you show them, they go, I really do like that. But sometimes you're working with a client and it becomes really clear just by showing pictures or just by like drawing things out, you can see, oh, you're gravitating towards this. Let's go that direction.
Yeah. I mean, I do the same thing. It's like, okay, let me see like lots of inspiration and they might not see it, but you'll be able to pick out those through lines, even just, how they shape the paths that they're pulling for their inspiration. Are they pulling a lot of broadleaf plants? You're going to see a very different pattern start to emerge. And then at that point, you kind of set those like parameters for that space.
Yeah. Well, I know there are lots of designers who you can see their work and go, that's definitely this person's work,
Yeah.
And it's kind of like people hire them to make that thing. And I try not to do that. I probably am guilty of it sometimes, like lean on my favorites and lean on the stuff I've done that I like, But I do really try with every client. I'm trying to find something new. There is something special that will happen if you find the right expression for who you are and your land and it fits. And like there's that Venn diagram where the thing you want to express and what your land can express and you're doing it and we find it, that's a great feeling.
It's like the combination of the place, the work that you bring as the designer and then the client and their wants, needs and desires on that whole design perspective. It changes every single time, There's definitely, you can look at characteristics, but it's not going to be the same.
I like to try to draw something new out of every person that I'm working with, right?
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. I see it in your work and I see it in my work. There's definitely through lines of the types of designers that we are. But I'm more interested in creating spaces that are for the people that I'm working with and developing their space for them.
It's just so rewarding. I helped my mother-in-law in Guatemala with her garden. And first of all, it was just like the weirdest experience when you're helping someone in a different part of the country.
Yeah.
It's a blast.
It's a different set of problems.
Yeah.
You have to look up all the weather and like, okay, I don't know what the microclimate is.
I drove to the nursery and the nursery is like filled with indoor plants, like
outside.
Literally. Yeah. All these palms and it was so weird to me. And they were gigantic and they cost like $2,
Wow.
So I filled the car up and I went back to plant it. And then she had like a grass, like a lawn, and I dug out the lawn. But underneath the soil there is almost like coarse pepper grain like size, like coarse grains of hummusy, kind of volcanic,
Yeah.
And it's like tan colored. I mean, you would put a shovel into it, just go whoosh, all the way down. And I was like, how do things grow in this? I had so much fun. I was like, I can't believe that this is going to work. I can't believe I can plant this in the garden outside.
She's probably like, yeah. We see it all the time.
Yeah, that's how it is. I mean, they have orchids hanging out of trees and people think of them as weeds. Like there are literally gardeners who will, tear them out of trees and burn them in burn piles because they're viewed as like, they're viewed almost like moss and lichens are here. They're viewed as like, is that tree being hurt by that thing growing on it? Like, it's messy. Let's take it out of there. Like they have like giant tillandsias with like huge purple flowering spikes. I was climbing up in the tree and taking pictures and people are like, what is wrong with that guy? But Andy's Orchids, right? The guy in San Diego, he loves moss and ferns, and he buys moss from the Pacific Northwest.
Wow.
We're like all into his stuff in San Diego. And he's like, oh, you guys have carpets of moss everywhere. It must be wonderful. You appreciate what we don't have. Like I recently went to Mexico and we're all tree people. It was for the International Oak Society.
Oh.
And so people would say, what's your name? Where are you from? And what trees grow where you live? It's like my favorite people. and I was like, oh, well, we've got this Pseudotsuga, the Douglas fir. And people were like, oh, I love that tree. I gained a new appreciation for it, actually.
Yeah.
And they actually did in Europe, where the bombs fell and they needed to reforest, they very heavily relied on Douglas fir. And so
Really?
people there, they have almost like a awe, like a respect for like, oh, that tree has been such a gift to us. We love that tree, you know?
It's interesting to see the native landscape from somebody
Exactly.
else's perspective. Like, it gives you an appreciation for, the plants that we take for granted. I mean, that
Yeah.
really hold up here and can be relied on a regular basis as beautiful. But because we're so used to them, like the orchids and the trees,
Yeah.
it's mind boggling, but it's the same thing
Yeah.
we do every day, People are like, how can we get rid of this? And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know.
Or in the foothills of the Sierras, like, underneath those oak trees where it's just like brown with acorns and leaves,
Yeah.
And I mean, I just go there and I'm like, this is incredible. And like some people who live there are like, oh, I hate these oaks. And I hate all this garbage everywhere.
Yep. I remember being a kid, I grew up with manzanitas just everywhere, just like thickets and thickets of manzanitas, and being like, oh, I hate them, because it was just part of my everyday landscape. And it becomes, it's hard to see it as beautiful. And then up here, we're like, oh my gosh, look at these manzanitas.
Yeah. It's really, that's how it is. I try to open my eyes to see it from an outsider's perspective. I mean, I have more Douglas firs on my 1 acre on Vashon than I can count. And there's little ones everywhere, popping up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if someone came to visit my garden, I would not point out a single Douglas fir, but some people might come here from like, South America and go, where's the Douglas firs? It's like, well, it's like that thing in Twin Peaks, where are the pine trees, It's like, well, all around you.
I used to garden a lot, and then started my own business, and then it's been a lot more challenging to be able to be in my own garden. It gets harder. I think you have to make space for it, but it can be challenging. I'm like curious at how you kind of manage all that, because you've been doing this for a lot longer.
Well, I mean, I'm not the best at work-life balance, but I try, it's like, I don't know. It's so life-giving to me to just water around in the garden, it's fun to do a project, but my favorite thing is just to like walk outside in the summer, in the evening when it's nice out, and not even have an agenda, and just start walking around and be like, oh, I'd like to move that over there. I'd like to clean this up. And then 2 hours go by. I don't often have the ability to do that, but I'd rather do that than take a vacation somewhere.
So luxurious, huh?
Yeah. And I hope that my clients do that. I've always thought that if I can give people a gift through helping them with their gardens, it's just to get them in their garden. And if you don't actually get out in your garden, you don't notice things. You don't smell it. You don't see the hummingbird come and drink from the flower, unless you're there. So, that's always the goal, is when someone is like sending me a picture because they're like just sitting out early morning drinking coffee, and they're like, oh my gosh, John, the sun came and it hit all the plants. And then they were like, all these birds showed. It's like, this is it. I like to garden alone, but if my family's with me and we're enjoying something in the garden together, that's the best. My kids are now 11 and 14 almost, but not long ago it seemed like they were 2 and 5. And be like, okay, let's plant the peas. This is important, because I'm going to hold myself accountable to this, because I was listening to an interview with Dan Pearson, who's from England, and he was talking about his childhood and how his parents like took on this old estate and this old garden that was abandoned. There were just vines everywhere and overgrown trees. The house inside and outside was a mess. And his parents kind of that was their hobby, was like unearthing what was there. And they literally like pruned their way through a hedge and found a secret garden. Like,
that's so cool.
Yeah. And then his dad would be like, okay, Dan, you can have that area, do whatever you want. And I want that for my kids. They might not want it. My hope this year is I can tell them, like, pick a spot in the garden. Like, none of it's sacred to me. I'll dig anything up. What do you want? And then, you can ask me for help if you want, but like, it's yours. If you do nothing with it, you'll see what happens to it. But I hope to give that to them, because they both do love nature and they both do love being outside, and they both do really enjoy the garden. The thing that most gives me satisfaction is both my daughters are outside, even in the rain, like with a rain jacket on in the evening. just wandering around, just looking at things, just being outside or climbing a tree. It's just like, that just makes me so happy. It's like, oh my God, I'm so glad to have been able to give you this space.
Yeah, you're creating gardeners. My kids are older. Some kids liked it more than others, but they all have an appreciation for it in a way that some of them I didn't expect. I think it's not daunting when they grow up with it. Like, oh, I can do this. You kind of like learn the language of gardening a little bit. And I think it carries with them. My oldest, she'll text me and be like, okay, I planted this. What do I do with this? And she keeps moving all over the country for work. So she just has to keep learning, I don't know. I think you plant that when they're little. And even if you don't think that they're paying attention, they are paying attention and they do value it, even if it's like they don't become garden designers or something. They see the good, bad, and ugly, right?
Oh man, that would be marvelous if one of my daughters calls me someday and says, Dad, I'm going to redo this spot in my garden. Oh man.
You're like, whoa.
My dad loves to garden and we made fun of him because he would work long hours and come home like in the winter and put on a raincoat and have a flashlight and go out in the rain in the dark and weed and kill slugs that were eating his hostas.
Like,
and we just laughed at him. But then it's been so fun. Then when I moved back to the area, it's so fun to collaborate with him on his garden. Nowadays, he has a pretty mature garden, but occasionally something will die or there'll be a space that opens up for some reason. And then he says, what do you think we should do here? And that's so fun. That's the
you
best.
just got to carry it through,
Yeah.
I don't know. I love that. I think it's one of those things. I mean, it can be developed. Your daughters will call you. They'll be like, hey, Dad. Okay.
What should I do
here? Yeah.
I'm going to love that.
You'll eat it up. It's great. Even when you don't live next to them, you can kind of participate with them on that stuff.
I love that.
I would love to see your garden because mine has been in a holding pattern for a couple of years because of some septic issues. And I'm hoping to be able to get back into it. It was all dug up. It's just been awful. And so I just kind of let it go. And so I'm looking forward to this year being able to get into it. So it's kind of fun. I'm like, ooh, I got to do my own garden again. It's been a long time. We'll have to figure out some time and come out there and see all the stuff that you're doing out there. Yeah, we want to go visit some gardens. And I mean, it's nice to have that inspiration.
Yes. It's worth a trip. So when you come, what do I need to show you? I need to show you the pond full of sedges that I love so much. I'll show you my garden. And then, probably the Beale greenhouses would be fun to visit because of the history and everything. The bog is a must, but that's a guided tour. I'd take you to Mukai to see the Japanese garden. Yeah. And then also probably on the south end of the island, there's this one bluff that is just covered in madronas. That's unbelievable. And the whole area used to be like that. The whole, it used to be all these madrona covered bluffs right near the water, and it's almost all gone, but we have it. It's a huge, I think it's the longest public park of beachfront in the Puget Sound.
Really?
So it's like 400 acres. It's it used to be the gravel quarry, right?
Wow. Okay.
It's where they used to dig up the gravel.
Wild. Yeah, I would love to see that. Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. So I appreciate it, John. How can people find you?
I have a website at hg-organics.com, but Instagram is what I update, and a Facebook page as well.
Are you doing any speaking events anytime soon?
I love speaking events. I'm happy to do them for anyone who's listening who has garden clubs or whatever. I'm going to give the sedge talk again. I love my sedge talk.
I would love to go to that. So let us know when you're going to do that next. That'd be cool too.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me too. I had a lot of fun. It
was good to see you. That's it for today's episode of the Relish Gardens podcast. If you love this conversation, make sure to subscribe. We've got new episodes every week. And if you know a gardening friend who'd love this, send it their way. Sharing the show helps grow our little garden-loving community. Until next time, I hope you find something in your garden to truly relish.